Hello again. What's up? Thank you for returning, or thank you for just like, thanks for coming. I don't know. I'm just gonna jump right into it because again, I decided to pick a topic that was incredibly extensive again, but I've broken it down, so it's fine. If you watched my last video, we were discussing ancient Egyptian mythology. We're moving to a different continent now to talk about a different mythology. So chances are, if you grew up in the 90s like I did, you have consumed media, or at least you know about who this guy is. And he's always depicted as like a good guy, a hero. The guy I am going to talk about today is Hercules. So he's a Greek hero. He's probably the most famous Greek hero, son of Zeus. The Disney movie where he's voiced by Tate Donovan, aka Marissa's dad from the OC. Or there's the Kevin Sorbo, like soapbox style adventure show. So I'll just let you know, Hercules is the Roman adaptation of the name. His real name was Heracles. Heracles was the son of Zeus. His mother was a human mortal woman named Alcmene. I think that's how you pronounce it. Alcmene, this woman who lived in Thebes. If you know a little bit about Greek mythology, you probably know that Zeus is married to Hera, the goddess of like motherhood and that kind of stuff. Hera is also his sister. This is just a common theme in Greek mythology, like everyone's marrying their brothers and sisters. So Zeus cheated on Hera with Alcmene, this mortal woman. When we get into it, you'll learn that Hera is very jealous, and with good reason, I guess, because her husband's just like fucking anything he can get his hands on. Hera hated Heracles' existence. It was an affront to her. She wanted to kill that baby right from the get-go, and she attempted several times. And I think to rub salt in the wound, like this illegitimate son of her husband, his name also translated to the glory of Hera, which probably pissed her right off. I just want to let you know that what I'm going to talk about today in particular is the fact that Heracles is a trash man. He sucked. Don't be fooled by the amazing soundtrack from the Disney movie. He was a hero, people loved him, but he was a privileged little brat, okay?
And that's the gospel truth.
And just to like further elaborate, the Disney movie took elements from Heracles' life and from Greek mythology and kind of like jumbled it up a bit, so it's not correct. I don't really remember the Kevin Sorbo series because it ran on like daytime TV when I was 8 or so, and so I didn't really watch it that much, but I do remember there being like a story arc of Hera like constantly trying to kill him.
He journeyed the earth, battling the minions of his wicked stepmother Hera, the all-powerful queen of the gods.
So, as I said, he was like the most famous of Greek heroes. He's not the only like son of a god or even the son of Zeus, but he was special. But anyways, so I just picked a few stories that really elaborate on him being a piece of garbage. So, Heracles has accidentally killed a handful of people unintentionally, and not once did he ever like get a real punishment for it. The first story of an incident like this happened when he was like a youth, probably like 13 or 14, I'd say. So he was spoiled. He was tutored by some of the greatest teachers of the time, and one example was, so this muse, Linus, came to Thebes, and Linus was the son of Apollo, who was a god, and a muse. Depending on the translation, it differs. He came to Thebes and was hired to be a musical tutor for young Herc. It is like documented that Linus kind of had a short temper, and so basically Linus is teaching young Heracles to play the lyre, some kind of instrument called either the lyre or the lyre. And Linus gets frustrated because he's just not picking it up. He's not putting in any effort. And he grabs a rod and he, slaps him across the wrists and yells at him. And Heracles responds by beating him to death with his own lyre. So I guess this is an instance where he didn't really have any fame to aid him whenever he did something wrong. So he was taken to court and they were going to try him, and he basically got up on the podium or whatever, and he quoted a law written by Rhadamanthys that basically is like, I have the right to defend myself in whatever means possible against an aggressor, and basically I can go free because that is my given right. And they were just like, yeah, fair enough, you're free to go. And look, corporal punishment is horrible, but so is murder. And I should mention that the other things he was tutored in were boxing, archery, warfare, just an aggressive man or boy given just the tools to continue being aggressive. This is just a little side story that leads into another story, but I think it's a good example of just kind of shitty views of women. So at some point, and I'll explain this in a second because there's a lot of crossover, but Heracles is off to defeat this lion, this famous lion, and in order to do it, he needs to gain permission from a man called Thespios. In Greek mythology, it was hospitality was a big thing. You were not meant to turn away someone who needed a place to sleep. So Thespios takes in Heracles and allows him to stay at his place for 50 days and 50 nights. And on top of that, he's like, hey, you can crash at my place and you can sleep with one of my daughters every night. Luckily enough, he had 50 daughters, so a different one every day. So Heracles sleeps with a different woman every night. And at the end of the 50 days and 50 nights, it is revealed to him in some way that these were 50 different women that you slept with every night. And he was basically just like, oh, really? I thought it was the same one every night. She had boobs and she had a vagina, so how was I meant to tell them apart? I just the concept of being they were different. Weird. This next story is actually a little sadder. Anyways, at some point, Heracles is still living in Thebes, and there's a rival kingdom. The people there are called the Minions, not to be confused with minions. It's spelled differently. They hated the Thebians because a member of the Theban populace, I think he was some kind of military man. He injured the minion king, and this king was transported back to his people, and he then died because of the injuries. And so there was this whole thing with the son of the king wanting revenge. And so he sends over these heralds to Thebes to basically send a message that they now have to pay tribute because they killed the king and they owe the minions tributes. But Heracles somehow knew that these heralds were on their way and intercepted them at some point. I don't know why he thought this would work, but he intercepted these three heralds and he mutilated them all by cutting off their ears, their noses, and their hands, and then tying them like a necklace around their necks and sending them back to Orchomenos, which is the place the minions are from. His message was essentially
tribute this.
Fuck you, you're not having our cows. They're our cows. Your king deserved to die. Eat shit. Anyways, this caused a war because was that really gonna do anything but further inflame the hatred between the two cities? And so Heracles essentially caused a war, which led to people dying. No one got mad about this. No one was like, maybe you shouldn't have done that. So this war happens. Many people die. One of the people that dies is Heracles' stepdad, Amphitryon, who basically pretended he was Heracles' real dad because he kind of was willing to turn a blind eye because he had this prodigy son he had another son who was his legitimate son. But so Heracles won the war that he caused, and his reward after this was he was given a wife. And the wife he was given was Megara, which you may know from the movie.
So, did they give you a name along with all those rippling pectorals?
And Megara had nothing to do with Hades. She was just a random lady. Honestly, Hades didn't give a shit about Heracles. Like, they just, like, you know, did their thing separately. This is kind of, like, not directly related to the story. But Amphitryon, Heracles' stepfather, died. And so Alcmene was widowed. And Zeus, who just kind of always had a soft spot for her, felt bad. And so Zeus sent her a man to be her new husband, who was Rhadamanthys, who I mentioned had that law. Rhadamanthys was also a son of Zeus. So Heracles' new stepdad was also his half-brother. So we're at a point where the war has been won between the Thebians and the Minions. Heracles has a new stepdad who's also his brother. He's got a wife, and he can now go home and just return to being a regular guy. I just want to say there are many different contradicting mythology stories depending on who it's written by. So a lot of Greek myths and fables kind of aren't linear. They somehow coexist all at once, but then also have a timeline, and it's just really hard to differentiate. This is just an example. In one translation, Heracles is allowed to marry Megara. In another, he is already married to her and already has kids to her. I'm going to follow that one because here's the sad part. Heracles is like traveling home to greet his family, his wife and his two children. They're at like a celebration kind of thing. There's a choir singing songs of like victory and congratulations. And then two of Hera's cronies rock up. The first one is Iris, who is the goddess of like rainbows, and she's also like a messenger god. And she's Hera's handmaiden, Hera's best friend. And the second one, depending on the translation, is either just like the personification of madness, or the goddess Lyssa, who is the goddess of like madness and rage and like rabies and stuff. They're sent there by Hera, obviously, and they barge in and they're like basically under instruction to drive Heracles insane, and they do. And then Heracles goes to his home, and his family are there, and he is completely delusional, and he sees them as enemies from the war that he came across, and he murders them. So that happens. He feels so awful that he decides to exile himself and punish himself for it because he feels terrible, and justifiably. So anyways, he goes to the oracle and he's basically like, hey, I killed my family and I need to exile myself. Where should I go? And so this segues into Heracles's technically 12 labors. So Heracles, from like basically the get-go, had the boys will be boys treatment. I feel like when he got into adulthood, he kind of learnt the concept of punishment, but was not being like given proper punishment, because this is not the only time he exiles himself to punish himself. There's just another instance where he's like in an argument with Prince Iphitos, and he just like in a like rage throws him off of a cliff and kills him. And he didn't intend on settling the argument with murder. He just accidentally did it. And so he sells himself into slavery as a punishment to himself. And he sells himself to this woman who has him wear a dress and then do needlepoint with like her other female slaves. Keep in mind, like Heracles was like the embodiment of like manly manless. He was like rugged and tough, and he's always depicted as having a big bushy beard. So anyways, I'm not gonna like detail the labors that gave him like his hero fame, but the labors took, I think it's estimated like 3 years or so, and he's on his last labor. It's been like 3 or 4 years since the murder of his beloved and kids, and he's on a labor and he has to travel to Hades. He travels to Hades, and while he's in Hades, he comes across a fallen comrade named Meleager. They were like companions during like the stories of Jason and the Argonauts, so they were pals. Meleager is like a troubled spirit now, and he's like in Hades, and the thing that's troubling him is not the fact that like he was killed or anything, but he just can't get over that his poor sister is like so desperately single. Sorry. His name is really difficult to pronounce. So Meleager's sister is Deianira. And also on this like trip through Hades, he comes across the spirits of Megara and his children, and basically he like bargains with Hades to like get them into the Elysian Fields, which is where heroes go. So like Hades didn't really have beef with Heracles at all. Like if anything, he like was on his good side. Like he managed to get his family into the Elysian Fields, which is where like only the like most prolific, brave heroes spend the afterlife. Anyways, so he's in Hades, bumps into his friend. His friend's like, please marry my sister, please. And then he's like, all right, I'll think about it. I'm just going to go visit my dead wife and kids for a second. Anyways, that happens. Many, I don't know how many actually. Several years later, Heracles is in the kingdom that Deianira resides. And he meets her and he instantly falls in love because she's a cool girl. She's like one of the boys kind of thing. Like it was very like emphasized on that she like rode her own chariot and she studied warfare and like combat and stuff. And it was like she was a cool girl. She was just like she could arm wrestle, she could drink a whole beer, you know? Like so he fell in love with her and they shared a mutual love of just violence, I guess. Because she was a princess, right? And princesses have suitors. If you are of some kind of noble or royal birth, basically the plan is to just like get you married. So she had several suitors. Heracles rocks up and all of the suitors but one like kind of scatter. They're like, I have got nothing on this dude. So the one suitor that remains is a god. Can't remember his name, but he's like a river god. And in that he has the ability to shapeshift. So they're competing for Deianira's hand in marriage. And during a battle between the two, this guy, his versing transforms into a bull and he runs at Hercules and Hercules grabs him by the horns and just like snaps off a horn and basically holds it over his head and he's like, I'll give it back if you like go away. And he basically like very quickly surrenders. So Heracles and Deianira marry and they are so happy and they live in the kingdom that Deianira is from. One day, they're just hanging out and Heracles accidentally kills the king's cupbearer. I don't know how a dude can just like continue to accidentally kill people, but he accidentally kills his father-in-law's cupbearer. And his father-in-law is just like, it's cool. It's fine. Don't even worry about it. It's just a cupbearer. But Heracles feels extremely guilty and you'll never guess what he decides to do. He exiles himself again, and he takes his wife with him. He and Deianira, they are wandering the lands looking for a new place to live, and they come across this river, and it's like difficult to pass. And along comes a centaur, and the centaur is like, hey man, I'll like carry your wife across for you if you want. Like, that's fine. I like cross this river all the time. And so Heracles is like, thanks man, that's really nice of you. So Deianira hops on his back and he crosses the river. And once he's across the river, he kind of like takes off with her and attempts to do something terrible to her. Heracles hears the screams of his wife and he pulls out his bow and arrow and he fires it off and hits the centaur. So this is significant because in Heracles' labors, he faces the Hydra at some point, which is that lizard-like beast that's got many heads, and every time you cut off a new head, two more pop out. So he faces that at some stage, and after he subdues it, and it is like its head is trapped under a rock. The Hydra has like very acidic blood, toxic, poisonous, lethal blood. And I don't know how this never like came up between the two. So when he slayed the Hydra, he took all of his arrows, which he must have a lot of. He dips all his arrow tips in the blood of the Hydra. So then his arrows are lethal. Anyways, fires off an arrow, hits the centaur. The centaur's like slowly dying in front of Deianira, and the centaur's dying after trying to like sexually assault her. And he looks up at her and he's like, oh, I just want you to know that like my blood it is like a potent love potion, and like you should collect my blood and like feed it to your husband so that your love never dies. I don't think he knew that the arrow was poison tipped, so I don't think he necessarily knew that his blood would be toxic. Anyways, he's like, so your husband has killed me anyways, but I want you to have this love potion. And she's just like, okay, I'll take it. I'll keep it for later. Thanks, centaur who tried to sexually assault me. So Heracles was a little like his father in the fact that he was a bit of a flirt. Like, it was kind of known that he was a bit flirty with women. Cut forward to another few years in the future. Heracles is away on this adventure and he sends a herald back home to collect some clean tunics for him. Deianira knows of this woman where Herc is fighting or adventuring or whatever. And she's like younger and hotter. And so Deianira is really worried that like Heracles is going to like leave her for this younger woman. And so she takes the love potion that she had collected many years earlier and she's just kind of keeping and slathers one of his tunics in it. So anyways, the herald returns back to Heracles with these new tunics and he puts the one on that is slathered in the toxic blood, and basically as soon as he puts it on, it starts to like sear and burn his flesh. It's like soaking into his pores and he is in so much pain and he frantically is like ripping the tunic off, and as he does that he hits the herald with his like mighty demigod fists and accidentally kills him. Because he was half god, he died slower than a mortal man would, so he was sent home from battle back to his wife, and soon after he dies. Deianira, so grief-stricken and guilty, then ends her own life too. It's kind of a sad ending. Anyways, after Heracles dies, because of all of his great adventures and the fact that he got away with everything and he was the jock of Greece, and just like, you know, his dad was the king of the gods. So of course he's going to be welcomed into Mount Olympus along the pantheon of gods. And he was made the god of free passes. Not really. So that is just a slither of Heracles' mythology. And I feel like I went easy on it, but I have to really emphasize, like, he sucked. He killed so many people just by like being careless and like letting his anger take control of him. Even if he felt guilty about it, he still literally killed someone because they were having a heated argument. His like thing was just accidentally killing people. It's kind of like when like a footballer in American college or university or whatever, like king hits someone or like assaults a woman and he gets away with it because they're like, well, he's the quarterback. We can't win the big game without him. Like, that was what Heracles' deal was. They were like, well, we can't punish him. He's like a hero. He like killed the Nemean lion and the Hydra. Just because he like accidentally killed some guy, it's not like we're going to punish him for it. So that was just a slither of Heracles' mythology. Thanks for watching. Do all the stuff, the subscribing and liking and commenting and doing all the things to help me gain static. And I'll see you again next time. Thank you so much.